is Carole Freeman. I'm the creator of the 90-Day Keto Diet Challenge program, and I'm here today with Katie McKenna.
Hello.
Katie, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Well, who are you, Katie?
My name's Katie McKenna. I am a nutritionist and a mental health therapist, and I've been in private practice now for about 6 going on 7 years.
Okay. Well, so tell us about your training. How did you get to be in the career that you're in? What did you do before?
Let's see. Do you want the short story, the medium story, the long story?
Oh gosh, how about the medium?
The medium. I went to Bastyr for my undergrad in nutrition in 2003.
Okay.
And I went and worked as a diabetes educator on an Indian reservation for a number of years.
Okay.
And while I was there, I learned a lot that people came in with many other issues besides nutrition concerns. And so that's what sent me actually back to Bastyr to do a master's level nutrition training along with counseling.
Okay.
And so that concluded in 2009.
All right.
And and that's actually where we met, was at Bastyr.
Right. Yeah, we did the same program at Bastyr, and we'll tell a lot of people don't know that about that program. So tell us a little bit, or tell everyone a little bit about that unique program, because as far as I know, it's the only one.
I do believe it is still the only one.
Yeah.
Bastyr offers now a dual degree program where you can be certified as a master's level nutritionist and also a counselor in clinical health psychology. And it takes about 3 years to complete, and includes also then after that about a year or two of postgraduate work. But it combines nutrition, mental health. It's really a clinical health psychology focus. So body, mind, spirit. To me is the quickest summary.
Yeah, that's a great explanation of it. So it sounds like then your experience in actual working with people led you to thinking you needed a little bit more
well-rounded.
Yeah, okay.
People were coming into my office where we were supposed to talk about diabetes education, but if they were dealing with depression or anxiety or grief, and I just didn't feel like I had the tools to help them there. And so I wanted to go back to school and really learn how to do that well.
Well, and it sounds like then that did you find that was almost everybody had something like that in addition to the food?
It's really true. And in fact, now 80% of what I do is counseling.
Okay.
So the nutrition piece is there, but a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them get over emotional resistance to making these nutrition changes.
Oh, okay.
So the education is, I can summarize that for people in kind of shorter appointments. It's more of getting them to follow through. That the counseling piece really comes forward.
Okay. Well, and I love that you brought that up, and I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit more about that, because I see that a lot with working with my own clients and this, the Keto Diet Challenge. I mean, it's a huge change dietary-wise that people go through.
Right.
And part of that is they wrestle with their identity of who they were before when they ate a higher carb diet, and then who am I now with this big dietary change.
Right.
So, do you have any points or anything like that you kind of help people work through as they work through that resistance of change?
Yeah, well, there's so many pieces. Sometimes it's simply, our food is part of our identity, part of our family's identity and our cultural identity. And so when somebody suddenly is no longer choosing to have breads or carbohydrates, then they can actually feel really isolated. They can feel really embarrassed ordering different things in restaurants or having to ask questions. They often don't want to be a burden of saying, oh, can you make this a little different for me? So that's hard. There is the other identity pieces of sometimes it sounds kind of strange, but because we've all grown up in a high carbohydrate society, there's also maybe like a sense of almost like entitlement, like we should be able to eat these foods. And so there's oddly maybe some grief related to letting that go. So those are some of the pieces besides the very internal parts of when somebody does lose weight, how it takes a while for their internal sense of self to kind of catch up with their current body. That takes time.
Those are all really, I think they're really important parts that a lot of people don't even think about when they go into some kind of a big dietary change. And I know I have clients that struggle with that. They identify as like, I'm a foodie. I love to eat out. I eat at all these restaurants, and that doesn't quite fit completely with this new dietary approach. And so how do you, can I be both of those, or do I have to let go of part of that? Or Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of experience with helping people navigate those
yeah,
changes.
that's part of what I really love about it. Is just how to work with somebody where they're at right now and help them keep going. Because to me, the biggest factor for success is consistency. And to address those emotional kind of roadblocks really helps somebody just get sustainable and consistent about these kind of nutrition changes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that's a really big missing piece that, you know, a lot of maybe nutrition professionals have.
I think so, yeah. They might, I know certainly some nutritional professionals might have a lot of empathy, but the specific counseling training just really feels so key.
Yeah. Well, and I know that most of the people that go through that program at Bastille, that's really what they want. They want to be able to have those tools to help people through the emotional
work.
Yeah. That's really great. So I really appreciate you being here and sharing.
You're welcome. I actually, this is my favorite subject. I don't get tired of talking about it.
That's all we call it, nutrition nerds sitting around.
Yeah, I think we're gonna geek out a little.
Yeah. So let's see. Can we go back a little bit and kind of talk about, like, so after you completed the program at Bastille,
sure.
You know, what then did you find as your focus for, you know, what the couple of years of clinical experience you got post graduation? What did that look like?
Well, ever since I became a nutritionist back in 2003, my focus has really been around obesity work. Okay. And that's kind of just been the heart and soul of my interest. Okay. And what was interesting is post graduation, I was I think floundering a bit, trying to find work, create work, and still get these hours. And I found a job at an eating disorder facility. Okay. And that at first I didn't know how well it was going to fit me because so much of my work and interest was obesity. Yeah. And then I started to really learn that I was perfectly trained to work with eating disorders. Okay. And that it really to me felt like then obesity and food addiction and eating disorders are all just like different sides of the same coin. Okay. And so I moved into working at a facility in Bellevue, and I worked there for about 3 years, which was a mix of running groups, one-on-one appointments, and like supportive meals. Okay. But it was just some really in-depth, a little bit of trial by fire learning, but it really prepared me then to feel confident to move into private practice, because working at that level of care, there's just many people come in crisis with a high level of need, and so having a team around me and to support me doing that work is just there's just so much to learn, and working with so many different stories. And so, you know, that was the whole mix, anorexia, bulimia, but then we started doing binge eating. Okay. And now in you know, in private practice, I do see that sometimes when somebody has a kind of a carbohydrate metabolism disorder, if they're eating too many carbohydrates, that can feel really bingey and cravings. And so that's, again, how like keto and low carbohydrates came into, one of the ways it came into my practice.
So it sounds like that initially the work there, it felt like it was discordant with your beliefs of what you thought. You know, it really challenged you as far as, you know, how does this fit with my beliefs about how people should eat, or is that...
No, it didn't necessarily challenge me. Okay. It was just an internal surprise, because eating disorders was not really on my radar to work with that kind of community or diagnosis set. So that was really it. To me, in my mind, I had always kind of considered obesity a different issue than eating disorders.
Okay, so it sounds like more than it just opened your eyes to how they're connected.
That says it really well, right? And now I really see it as connected. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I often think of, you know, they're all on a spectrum. Do you kind of think of it as that way? Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that we all fall somewhere in that
right. And even, you know, people who then, you know, the spectrum also continues to, not something diagnosable, but like eating hang-ups and eating quirks and difficulties with self-esteem. I think many people can relate to that.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Very cool. All right. And so then you had mentioned then how that kind of led into, you started seeing that people with carbohydrate metabolism issues,
Right.
how that perpetuated overeating and perhaps binge eating sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that begin, or where did that come in for you?
Well, there's really a kind of a side story there,
Okay.
and that is that my closest friend actually became very sick with ulcerative colitis,
Okay.
and was in and out of the hospital for a length of time, and actually almost lost his life.
Oh, wow.
And then so through his journey and discovery of how to heal, he discovered ketogenic diet.
Okay.
And that was a really interesting thing to me, because coming from Bastyr, we're taught this
Yeah.
all foods fit.
Yeah.
If the food grows from the ground and if it's whole, then it's healthy for you and
Yeah.
it's healthy for everyone.
Yeah.
And so, carrots, quinoa, potatoes, all of this stuff was just, to me, a pure food, so nobody should have a problem with it.
Right.
And watching him and transform his health and get his life back was another eye-opening experience, because he proved to me, regardless of any of the literature out there or the science or the controversy, that for some people, a ketogenic diet is actually perfectly what they need.
Yeah.
And so when I started to, I think that's what really helped, is that it was a personal story.
Yeah,
It wasn't a
yeah.
research article I read or a class I took. It was somebody's life that transformed
Yeah.
in front of my eyes. And
Yeah.
it's really true. He's got his life back now, and I continue to learn from him. And so I started applying what I was learning from him, learning more and teaching myself about it, and then using that in private practice with people who
Okay.
have diabetes, PCOS, maybe just a generalized obesity or binge eating disorder,
Okay.
about how do carbohydrates sometimes hijack our system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I found that to be true. Like from my own personal experience,
Mm-hmm.
was I went to the same school as you, and the whole we were really taught as like a balanced mind-body approach, that you should help people just find a way to allow all foods in their diet and just
Right.
eat mindfully, listen to your intuition of what your body really wants, and then weight shouldn't be an issue. However, I found I come from a family where we have type 2 diabetes and dementia, and so genetically I'm predisposed to be more sensitive to carbohydrates. But I found, as I followed those principles, and what I tried to espouse in my own practice, was that my waistline continued to grow, and along with that, my cravings for carbohydrates increased as well. And also, I started craving fast food, and that just didn't fit with what I believed to be the healthiest food, but I just found that I was compelled to eat fast food as well.
Right.
And through reading Gary Taub's work, and then just really understanding how when your body is in that carbohydrate storage mode or fat storage mode, when insulin is chronically high, that your body is actually hungrier because the glucose is getting stored, and that perpetuates the cravings and the hunger, and a lot of times an insatiable hunger as well.
Yeah.
And as I put all those pieces together with my own body, my own experience, and then reading Gary's work and a lot of other people's work, I just started to realize that for some people, eating a very high carbohydrate diet doesn't fit with
Right.
mindful eating and intuitive eating, and
that's the biggest piece, I think. Intuitive eating can be a really healthy, useful thing to understand as a tool. But primarily what has to come first is that you've got the right percentage of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats for you. Because if you're not in that right zone for your own body, your hunger is going to be like a false hunger, a falsely elevated hunger, and then you can't trust it.
Yeah, and I always tell my clients, so you've got to get the biology lined up first.
Right.
You get your biology, you harness your biology, and then the eating habits are much easier to fix or change.
Right. And it's also a lot easier to listen, because you finally, for some people, they're telling me when they start to follow a higher fat diet, they're like, I'm full for the first time ever.
Yeah.
I'm satisfied for the first time ever. I don't have to think about food all day long. I'm not fighting myself.
Yeah.
And their relief just is so important. And then their sense of like agency, their own understanding of their capacity to make these changes just goes up and up.
Yeah, because so many people have probably felt like they're a failure because they've tried so many diets in the past where they restrict calories to try to lose weight because society tells them obesity is unhealthy, and they've tried so many things and they're told, use your willpower, but they're just constantly
right,
hungry.
fighting.
And you get the biology lined up, you get your metabolism fueled the correct way, lowering carbohydrates, increasing fat, and then like you said, you've got your appetite is normal for the first time.
Right.
You're not constantly chasing cravings and hunger, and it really gives you a sense of empowerment to be able to, finally feel like you're a normal person and that you have normal hunger and
right.
that you have control over what you eat.
It's a wonderful thing to watch somebody transform through that process.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be a part of it and to I sometimes just consider myself a guide for them to navigate and figure out what's right for them.
Yeah.
And, also because I do come from the eating disorder side and the food addiction side, that although sometimes I think it could be helpful for people to just go cold turkey into really lowering their carbohydrates. But for some people, if they're mentally not in that place to make such drastic choices, we do kind of like step down approaches, and it's slower.
Yeah.
It is slower, but sometimes mentally that's just kind of what they need to adjust along the way. But they start to get little tastes of success, and then that helps them be like, okay, I'm willing in 2 weeks to drop the carbs a little further.
Right.
Or they even come to me and they're like, you know what, I've been doing this for a while. You told me at some point I'll probably have to drop it further. I think I'm ready.
Yeah.
Instead of me telling them what to do.
Yeah. That's a really key piece, is that empowerment, letting them decide when they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
Because I see that a lot of that people are imposed and they're told they need to eat this way and they have to. They're a lot less successful than if it's their decision when they're ready to do it.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So let's see. So you started implementing that, or started using that in practice with your clients, and started seeing some really great results.
Right.
How about for yourself? Have you?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah. Well, let's see. How has my process changed in how I feed myself through the years? Because it certainly has. When I was younger, I was vegetarian.
Okay.
Actually, well, I'll give you just more info because maybe it's interesting. I was definitely like the cheese and bread vegetarian.
Okay.
It was lots of cheese pizza.
Yeah.
We would go to McDonald's and order like the number 2 without the burger. So it was like buns and cheese and fries.
Yeah.
I lived that way for a while.
Okay.
And that was actually right before I went to Bastyr to become a nutritionist in the early 2000s.
Okay.
And so that's when Whole Foods got introduced to me.
Right.
And so I started understanding more about it. I actually had never bought raw broccoli.
Okay.
We had frozen broccoli with cheese, but I never had even cut a whole beautiful thing of broccoli until I was in my 20s.
All right.
So that was kind of a food transformation. And then slowly over time, I actually no longer was a vegetarian. But a lot of vegetarians have very high carbohydrate diets.
Yes.
And so that, one of the things that does come up was when somebody has some moral choices with food, but ketogenic would be a good diet for them, there's a little extra complexity to help them try to do both. But anyway, for me, slowly I think I started to understand and play with my own amount of carbohydrates, understanding that if I had even something whole grains like oatmeal for breakfast, I found I was still really hungry within about 2 hours. And that I always thought that was normal. I just thought I had a healthy appetite.
Yeah, because you need to eat every 2 hours, right?
Right.
So many of us are taught, and even I think that's kind of a message that was perpetuated in school, was that it's normal to need to eat every 2 to 3 hours.
Right. And I come from a family, my maiden name is Aksa. I turned out a little short, but all the people in my dad's family are over 6 foot.
Okay.
They're big people, they're big eaters. We're just big boned, kind of strong, healthy appetites.
Yeah.
So, but over time, my weight was slowly increasing, not much, but steady over the couple of years. And I just said, this hunger thing, why am I so hungry? And so when I started, actually, it was a simple switch, but I started having a lot of like eggs and zucchini for breakfast. And I was, I'm okay until lunch.
Yeah.
And then lunches switched over from things that were like really easy to go foods like sandwiches and burritos into more like salads and soups. And I was like, I'm getting more vegetables in.
Yeah.
I'm feeling just more satisfied. And then the weight gain just kind of stabilized and even dropped a little bit. Not a lot, but some.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, I probably, as a nutritionist, I'm always kind of calculating the numbers. I probably come in around like 60 to 75 grams of carbs a day.
Okay.
I tend to eat a piece of fruit most days, maybe not every day. it's nice for me because I am in a really healthy place that I have flexibility.
Yeah.
And I don't have food allergies, and it's something I'm really grateful for, that, like, if I wanted to, I can choose to have something that might be a higher carbohydrate.
Yeah.
But in general, it doesn't feel good for me. I notice that if I start to have more, I start to want more. I start to be hungrier and crave more, and it might affect even, like, PMS issues or things like that. So, I really like the mid-range works for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've really found your sweet spot, what works for your body, your sweet spot.
Right.
Your not so sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that illustrates, I've talked about this with a couple of these chats that I've had, that there is a big difference between somebody who has that metabolic flexibility, that their metabolism, their ability to metabolize carbohydrates and fats is still intact. That gives them that metabolic flexibility that you can have a little bit higher carbohydrates, consume fruit or some other things, and your body can, tolerate that, process it okay, and then still be able to get back, a lower carbohydrate meal maybe the next time. But for people like me and a lot of other people that have pretty significant insulin resistance, it may not ever be possible for me to tolerate 60 to 70 grams of carbs a day. I haven't experimented with that, but it tends to be this slippery slope of getting a little bit more in, starts to bring my appetite back, and then, like you said, it starts to feel like, then
it kind of wants to escalate.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't know. Like, I've had that discussion with other friends. It's like, does the metabolism get so damaged that you can never go back to a normal diet? Well, normal diet, we don't.
Sure.
80% carbs is probably not good for anybody, but can it be repaired? Is this something over time that then I can develop metabolic flexibility that I could, maybe occasionally have some fruit or something? I don't know. I think it's an area that's still to be explored.
It seems like some people can start to have, to keep it under 20 or 30 takes a lot of getting used to in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it would be nice for some people to, like, even once a week be able to creep up to 45 with a glass of wine or some chocolate or some of the little pleasures of life. But it does seem to be that many people, if they found that ketogenic works for them, I usually tell them, this is what's in alignment with your natural body, and this is a lifetime plan for you. It doesn't mean you have to be perfect every single day, but it does mean, like, this works. It will continue to work.
Right. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What other questions do I have for you, Katie? Let's see. So what are some, let's dive a little bit more into, some of the psychological piece of that.
Okay.
What are some things that you see that people struggle with in the beginning of, going on a very low carbohydrate diet?
Well, I would say one of the first things that comes up actually is fear. Is this okay for me? Anything from, like, people who are educated in the 80s and 90s are often still have a bit of that low fat is best. They might have even been told by their doctors to have a low fat diet, a low salt diet. And so when I start to suggest 80 to 100 grams of fat and more salt, people, it's really the opposite of what many people have been taught. So that's scary. And people have to really go home and think about it because
who do I trust, this person telling me this is pretty much the opposite of everything I've been told for the last 30 years, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Lots of salt, low carbs, high fat. What?
Right. This isn't going to be good for me. Or you know what they also are concerned about is, like, well, so it'll help me lose weight, but it'll be worse for my heart.
Okay.
And so I try to explain that, if your body's losing weight, in my belief and the philosophy that I have is, like, it's going to mean that things are improving on the inside too, the things that we can't measure. And I encourage them to do, like, a blood lipid values and things like that, to just be keeping an eye on that, and that gives them peace of mind also. So fear comes up, I think, at first. They question if they'll be able to follow through. And then that piece I mentioned before about just potentially feeling isolated, like, oh, nobody else eats this way. Whether or not it's coworkers or family members. I work with a lot of moms. They don't want to make 2 different dinners. So there's just a lot of hard work to this switch. Well, and I think that's one of the things about my program that helps is you've got that community. So I agree.
Instead of feeling less less alone, or instead of feeling more alone, we have that group. We've got the Facebook group, and then on the webinars as well, people are there as a group. So at least they don't feel as alone going through that. And then, we brainstorm things for them to be able to do to, how do you integrate this into your everyday life? And, there are a lot of, Facebook groups for ketogenic diet.
There are, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that really, really helps people, develop that new identity and feel a part of something, because it typically is what I found what makes somebody really successful on a diet change is integrating that into their identity, making that a part of who they are. So, whether somebody's following a paleo diet or Whole30 or, some other approach like that, what are some other common ones?
Those hit a lot of like what's most current, and I'd say in the last decade of the newest lingo.
Yeah, yeah, and when people make that a part of their identity of who they are, I am a paleo person, or I am a keto dieter, or I'm a keto person, that helps it, them find, make that part of their identity.
Well, and then when you see also other people struggling and having successes and going through it, it also makes you feel like you're not the crazy one doing another crazy fad diet.
Yeah.
And I also like to explain, like, this isn't actually something new. This is actually something very, very old.
Right.
And it's the same thing with organic food. Like right now we have, organics as a label, but actually all food was organic some 200 years ago, and so helping people know, like, this isn't a brand new idea. We're just bringing back a lot of old concepts.
Right. So, so what are you talking about? Where does it come from?
Oh, well, I mean, there's different theories, and I don't think we actually know enough to say exactly what our ancestors always ate, because it seems like around the world we get a lot of different evidence about, people in the tropics probably did consume fruits, but people in northern climates probably had a lot less carbohydrates, and even our ancestors that ate like roots and tubers and bark, there's not a lot of carbohydrates in those foods. In fact, one of the most interesting things I've been learning about is how we've modified fruits. And not genetically modified, that's a different topic, but literally like chosen the ones that are higher sugar, bigger fruits. And how bananas used to be much smaller and more fibrous. Apples used to be a lot more sour and tinier. And so nowadays, even what we think is the healthy thing to do, like eat 2 to 3 pieces of fruit a day, we're talking like big Honeycrisp apples. That's sometimes 45 grams of carbs just in a Honeycrisp. An old-fashioned apple did not.
Right. They were small, they were sour, and they were only fermented for cider to drink. They weren't actually eaten as a food crop. Right. Yeah.
And if you did come across berries, it was like, you would take the few you could get. Versus now when I go to the store, if I bought blueberries, you could eat them by the handful. So things like that too, of understanding how we also ate the whole animal, including making bone broth, using the fats from the animal. Actually, even one of the things that's really important with ketogenic diets is having the right amount of salt. And our ancestors, when they did, I'm going to just say, when they would slaughter an animal, they would actually collect its blood, and they would drink the blood. That was a very normal thing. And now we hear about it. Even when I say it, I'm a little shy to say it, but that's how they got their sodium. So for people who were like landlocked, people who used to live like on the coastal regions would have fish and salt from the ocean, but people internally, that's actually where they got it. So anyway. Carbohydrates were much less available a long time ago, and we kind of look at things as far as like as we've become an agricultural society, and so we're talking about pre-agriculture. So there's that piece, and then there's also the information that in the early 1900s, ketogenic diets were used to treat obesity very successfully. And I'm not sure when they started being used for epilepsy. You probably know that. When did that
I think
start?
Early 1900s, like 1910, 1920.
So that's also a piece of it.
Well, it was before they had the pharmaceuticals, before they had any medications, and so the dietary approach, was effective. But then when medications came in, people rather take a pill than have to restrict their diet.
And they were encouraged to do that. And as far as medicine, in medicine a lot of times they say things like, well, why make those dietary changes if you don't have to? Right. Just like, the other day I was lifting some heavy stuff, and the person helping me is like, why lift it if you don't have to? Like, oh, it's good for us. It's good for our bones. It's good for our muscles to work.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. A totally random aside. I think how hilarious it is that people will pay money per month to join a gym membership, but then like if they need to move their furniture or things like that, they'll pay somebody to come and do that for them, or they'll pay somebody to come and clean their house. So the everyday things that we used to do that would get us physical exercise, we don't want to waste our time doing that. However, we will pay money to go
and drive to the gym.
Yeah, and drive to the gym.
Which I am guilty of.
Yeah.
I drive to the gym.
Yeah, totally unrelated, but it's still a curious thing I think that humans do. Yeah.
Well, part of, I think that the heart of what we're kind of saying is in some ways, because we've taken science, like for example medication, and looked at it a little too narrowly, that it's gotten a bit glorified, and we've lost sight of the wholeness of like these bodies need to move, we need to be in harmony with our food, we need to be eating really natural food, and some of that is kind of a lost art, I think, these days.
Yeah, that whole body.
Yes.
Wellness. I wonder then if there are any other, like what kind of a psychological orientation do you have? What kind of tools do you draw from when you're helping people?
Yeah, well, to be honest, these days when I really describe it is it's a soulful CBT.
Okay.
CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's a lot about how our thoughts and behaviors interact. But I put that soulful spin on it because I like to really get at what has deep heart meaning for people.
Okay.
What's motivating you to make these changes? People show up in my office sometimes at the end of their rope, as far as I've tried everything as far as losing weight, nothing's working.
Yeah.
But there's a sense in them, a grain of hope that says, I think something's still possible. I have a sense that I can alter my future. And to me, that's really starting to talk about somebody who's in touch with an idea of a future destiny, their ability to create change. And that's not textbook psychology necessarily.
Right, yeah.
It's got that sense of meaning, that life could be better, more richer, more alive inside.
Yeah, okay.
And that's really what I try to work people into. And then I guess I would say I couple that a lot with helping people with empowerment. That's my most favorite topic these days, is getting people in touch with their own personal power.
Yeah.
And that correlates to being in our bodies, physically caring for our bodies, getting good communication, whether that's emotional communication or physical hunger fullness cues, but about empowerment and self-direction. And that shows up not just in diet choices, but also, are you happy in your relationships and your career life, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's great.
So I think that's I guess that kind of, I pull in a lot of different things. Over the years I've learned many different tools, but I like to ask people, I'm like, okay, so walk me through that when you were feeling stuck on like what to eat or what not to eat, or you were feeling really guilty about your food. What was your thought process?
Okay.
And because honestly, it goes right to this place of something like, well, I ate 3 slices of pizza and then I felt guilty and I felt worthless and I feel like I'm a failure. And that might sound severe to some people, but I think many people would actually relate to it, that it goes that deep that quick.
Yeah.
And so really we're, okay, so you feel like you're a failure here, and then working to look at the negative voice and the critical voice and how that disciplinarian inside of us is just trying to help us when they say, oh, you're so stupid, why did you do this again? How to actually start to incorporate self-compassion and gentleness to really make these changes. Because I think a lot of people, if they've got a history of yo-yo dieting, also have a really strong inner critic that is pretty full of attack. And that's not going to help. It doesn't help.
No.
Ever.
No, because the more guilty and bad you feel and label yourself, then that perpetuates what you think of as bad eating behaviors.
Right. Or increases your need for comfort, and then you're like, oh, well, I've already blown it, I might as well.
Right.
And then you're kind of just stuck in that process.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, I do. To me, it's so valuable to be able to sometimes like break down the nuts and bolts about, okay, this has barbecue sauce, 12 grams of carbohydrates. Is it worth it to you?
Yeah.
About food, and really helping somebody harness their biology and their metabolism, and then to be able to couple it with these other pieces, like, do you feel alive? Do you feel empowered?
Yeah.
Are you in self-compassion?
Yeah.
To me, that's just really, really good work. I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's real. It has to be so satisfying to be able to see people like come to that full blossom of who they are, who they can be, or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. I I appreciate that you're doing that work in the world, because more people need that. Like, instead of just being told, like, you're not acceptable because you're overweight, like, no, let's help you feel your worth in this world, and you are worthy, and when you feel that, then you're better able to take care of yourself. And
well, you know, that's actually the thing that's still, it's so painful for me to witness when somebody comes in who has a larger body and feels worthless because they've been taught that, you know, if you're overweight, it's because you're lazy. And, you know, when we start talking about like ketogenics and carbohydrate metabolism or diseases of carbohydrate metabolism, like, this is not your problem.
Right.
This is not your fault. This is not a personality flaw. Like, that is the number one thing that I usually address in the first session. Is to really start to separate those two. Is like, you've got a body that does not digest carbohydrates. It's not a weakness. It's not a flaw. Because that's just, it's so painful. And that's what keeps me busy. I've got a super busy private practice. So I wish there was more people out there doing the work, because sometimes when I can't see, you know, I can't see a new client maybe right away, there's not a lot of people to refer them to. That's why, part of why you and I have been starting to work more together, because I'm like, okay, go see Carole, or, oh, you're on the east side, go see Carole.
We can fit that all together, and you need to train some more Katies to be your force. How do you encourage people to engage in self-care? So that's something that I bring up a lot on my in my group, is that once you remove, you know, because a lot of people, when they're over, you know, in that carbohydrate high diet mode, they spend a lot of time thinking about food, thinking about what they're going to eat next, preparing food and all that. And when you remove that, then you have actually a lot of mental space and time in your life left. And I really encourage people to, you know, from the very beginning, start cultivating that self-care, because not only do you need to do that to because you're not using food to medicate and to care for yourself anymore, but also you have more time instead of developing some other bad habit. I shouldn't say bad habit, but some other habit that's detrimental to your health. How do you cultivate self-care? So how do you encourage people to do that?
Well, you know, I actually combine it with sometimes some, like, identity exploration, because a lot of times people are also feeling a little lost in themselves and who they are. And because they're stressed and they're busy working, and then have spent so much time and money trying to go on diets or procure food. And so I asked them things like, what did you used to do for fun when you were a child? Because great. You know, when I say, what do you like to do for fun, people are like, I don't know. And so I encourage them to do trial and error. Like, take like a single painting class. You don't have to sign up for something that's 12 weeks. Maybe, you know, go to REI, take one of their hiking classes, take a photography class. I know those things cost money, but it's a bit of exploration, and it helps people start to develop hobbies and creativity and expression, and those are all really, really healthy forms of self-care. So you know, these days I really love all the adult coloring books that are coming out that are super fun, because it's something you can do at home. For families, I remind them about games. We play a lot of Yahtzee in my house.
Because that's big, like, woo!
You know, but it keeps people busy, it keeps them interacting, because the other thing, too, is a lot of us get too much screen time. You know, or so what people do to decompress after work is they watch TV, but that's not necessarily rejuvenating. I also encourage activity that's not that necessarily meant to just burn calories, so like gentle yoga, qigong. Sometimes somebody might be really into like a martial art, like a keto. That's just something really new for them that they can start to dabble in.
A keto on keto.
Then there's all the standard stuff like paint your nails, take a bath, read a book, call a friend. But that's super standard, and sometimes, although it's actually pretty effective, people tend to like gloss over it because they've heard it a million times. So I tend to just try to suggest like artistic, creative, experimenting.
And do you then help people set, like, you know, do they have a goal each week, how much they need to do, or is it just completely individualized for what fits with a person's life? Or
I think overall it is pretty individualized. You know, I set goals just depending. Some people need more push than others. So I might say, and sometimes you even got to break it down small, like just research 3 different classes you might like to take. Don't sign up for them. Just research, see what's out there. And that's just kind of a way to start to get it going too.
I'll often have people just start with making a list of ideas.
Right.
That's very non-committal and approachable and...
I have a client that actually went the volunteer route, which is another good suggestion. Whether or not that's like maybe picking up trash or like, there's like trail support in the parks and stuff. But she volunteers at a place where there's horses. And so she goes and spends her Saturday mornings like brushing the horses and grooming the horses. And she loves it.
Yeah, something that's physical and, contributing to the, society and community, being part of, having meaning, right?
Right. And for some people, working with animals can be profoundly healing.
Yeah.
So, like, the Humane Society often needs volunteers. Things like that are also options. I know we're busy people, but the idea is understanding that sometimes it takes energy to make energy. And so when you can do something, even though it's another thing on your schedule, if it lifts the heart, that gives a lot of value.
It's really great. Such great. What are some of your, like, go-to, pantry staples or fridge staples that you find a lot of people this works really well for them to have this around? Or
right. Well, I love those. I don't even know what people make those little egg pucks in the muffin tins.
Okay.
Do you know that recipe?
Yeah. So like a mini frittata type of thing?
Yes, like a crustless frittata.
Yeah.
I think that's great because I'm all about spending less time in the kitchen. So I like things where you can make a number of them and then just warm them up later.
Yeah.
So that's a great breakfast idea. The other breakfast thing I often tell people to do is to like saute some mushrooms and kale, like a big batch of it on a Sunday night, and then on workday mornings you can just grab some of that, warm it up, and crack an egg or 2 on top. So you're not chopping the kale and mushrooms every morning. That's too much work, honestly.
Right. And you wouldn't be from Bastyr if you didn't recommend kale.
Yes. It's true. I am a fan of like soup, salads, stews, chilies, those kinds of things you can make batches of, and then it travels well with you for the work day. Within this, in general, I tell people it's almost like variations on a theme.
Yeah.
What's your protein, what's your vegetable, what's your fat?
Yeah.
And it's almost like in my mind I imagine like a slot machine.
Yeah.
And you get your vegetable, your protein, and your fat, and every day you're just like, okay, what is it today?
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of roasted vegetables, or sometimes if I'm in a rush I just broil them. So cauliflower, broccoli, that just is always delicious to me. I never get tired of it.
Toss it some oil so it gets nice and crispy.
And a good amount of salt. And honestly, that's, coming from Bastyr days where we had to do cooking classes with long ingredient lists and lots of spices is great. Some people really love it, and I did for a short period of time. Mostly, I'm a garlic, salt, pepper person these days.
Okay.
I keep it pretty simple, but, when people do address that, they're like, well, this is boring.
Yeah.
I remind them that actually... maybe that's a benefit because food used to have such an emotional charge. So right now it's boring, so it just is what it is, and then when you're hungry you eat and then it's over.
Yeah.
And so there is some real peace of mind that can come when food feels boring.
Well, and that's I love that perspective because I definitely have clients that are sharing that as like, I feel bored with the food selection, and I've gone the route of encouraging them explore some different foods, but I love that perspective of like, well, that tells you something that that means that before it probably had a lot of charge to it, and now you're removing that. What else are you going to add? Are you going to go take a painting class now or something to give you that excitement, entertainment in your life?
Yeah, food's starting to fall into its natural place in the piece of the pie of our life, and it's no longer taking up so much property, really. It's smaller, and so we do have to fill that space.
Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah. I also, I do like green juices. So a lot of people like to make smoothies, but oftentimes they're full of like yogurt and fruit. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You can do lots with like cucumber and spinach and
avocado,
lemon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to share some of your green recipes.
Yeah, you know, and personally for me, one of the things that I've been exploring too is I know that the variety of fats can be really, really healthy for people. But I've had a few people who actually can't do a lot of dairy.
Okay.
So they're, following a ketogenic diet without dairy is also another layer of just making it work for you.
Yeah.
Or some people are just more of like a Mediterranean fat, so lots of olive oil, avocados, and olives instead of so much, some people have moved away from using like coconut fat or bacon just because of how it's working for them. So if ketogenic process isn't, it's still some trial and error to find out what works for you, but there's still lots of ideas and resources to keep tweaking it until your body's resonating with it.
Yeah, and there is that, adaptation period in the beginning.
Certainly.
Having some support of what that's like going through is important too.
Yeah. I had somebody just recently actually told me that she put herself on a ketogenic diet and felt good for a few days and then felt awful for a while, and including like intense mood swings, and she's like, so that's not good for me. I'm like, well, how much research did you do? How supported were you? How prepared were you? And she was just winging it, and so it was rough on her system.
And that's I prepare people for that. Like, here's the phases of adaptation you're going to go through, and here's some of the things you might experience, but just know they're temporary, and you're going to feel so much better on the other side that it's really worth it. Go through this, or
what I think helps is actually starting to just understand that more and more people are doing it with really good success.
Yeah.
And so when I can sit in my chair in the office and let somebody know, like, hey, I know you've tried a lot of things, but actually I've got an idea of something you haven't tried.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to go through this process with me, it really could work for you. Because after enough experience, I can read the signs of, like, who probably would really respond well to it. And so just really just knowing that there's still options for people who might have gotten to a pretty hopeless place about their weight or their health. This is something that's working for a lot of people. Just
giving people hope is...
Right.
Yeah.
And then, when you start trying it out, and many people do start to feel better and see changes in their bodies pretty quickly, and so that just encourages them to, like, take it further and keep going.
Yeah, I know that early on for me was a very big motivator, because I saw huge improvement within the first few days. So,
right. Yeah, and it can be drastic for people.
Yeah.
And things show up. I even read your recent post about, like, sometimes various aches and pains go away that you thought were unrelated, or many different things you're like, well, this was all connected.
Yeah. All those things that we think are just normal part of getting older. That,
headaches.
Yeah. Achy joints and pains and things like that. Yeah. Popping jaw.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, you've given us a lot of really great tips, and I loved hearing about your the work that you're doing and how transformational it is for people on so many levels, both physically and emotionally, and the soulful level, like your term, to use your term. So I wonder if we could just wrap up with some tips that you have for how do you integrate, or how do you develop your new identity when you've made such a big change. And
that's a good question. Well, the truth is, I think it takes our internal self some time to get that update. It's not like when you just go on your computer and you hit update and then it's done in a few minutes. It does just really take time. For example, people say, like, they see pictures of themselves and they don't recognize themselves in this new body or this change, or
they feel the same, right? Like, they've lost maybe a significant amount of weight, but they say they feel like the same person. Right?
That's what I mean. So when they see the picture or catch the reflection, they don't recognize it because it's a smaller body, and their minds are still kind of a larger size. And so I think that, I guess my tip, and this is one of the things I think I feel most comfortable when I've been working with somebody for a while, is, like, what are some kind of self-love practices? And it gets kind of specific as far as an ability to sit with yourself, maybe even to look in the mirror at your body. Sometimes people actually haven't been doing that, or they've been doing it only in self-attack. Those are... one thing is just to actually get a new visual update on who you are and how you look. Going through the closet and getting rid of anything that doesn't fit, I think, is a good way to just kind of clear things out, and only have clothes in your closet that make you feel good.
Yeah.
And are the right size for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes too, people don't actually know what, I mean, obviously with clothing manufacturers, sizes can be quite a variety.
Yeah.
But to get a good idea on what size you actually are, once your body's changed, I think really helps. And then the other stuff besides body size changes is finding ways in people that you can be genuine with and vulnerable about the process and talking about it, sharing your story and being witnessed is a good way to get that mirroring and that feedback of who you are today and some responses there. So I think that might even be the most important one is finding safe people to talk to about it and and to be able to share the ups and downs of the process so you can just be really real and authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So whether that's a counselor or a therapist or even just close friends or other people that are going through the same changes.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really great. And your recommendation about like, an accurate assessment or just getting in touch with what your body looks like, that goes along with, I really recommend people taking pictures along the way of their body because it is common that as you lose weight that you can kind of start to feel like, well, I feel the same. I don't know if I've actually lost weight. And so you can, those comparison photos for a lot of people, and I know they have been for me, is like really validating that the hard work that I've been doing is working and my body's getting healthier. And to be able to see that in those photos is really, really, it's really empowering. And along those lines as well, I dare my clients at the very beginning to take a photo of themselves in as little clothing as they feel comfortable with and actually post it in our group. And some of them have done that, and the ones that do, they have reported this actually very empowering. And I found what it does is so like you said, they're so used to just looking at their body and criticizing it and feeling bad about it that taking that away, like this is just a starting place. This is like starting a marathon at the beginning of the starting line. You don't criticize yourself for, I'm only at the start, how could I only,
That's true.
I haven't run 26.2 miles yet, I'm so terrible. Like, it's just a place you're starting. And I know a lot of people, the association is like, well, I've done this in the past, and I've failed so many times, so it just reminds me of that, to change that mindset into like, this is my starting place. It's not that my body's bad or terrible. It's just what it looks like right now. And it really helps with empowerment, but then also seeing that transformation over time.
Right, and validation.
Yeah. It's a big step for a lot of people. But
but it's got value.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you being here and sharing
you're welcome.
Chatting about keto with me. So we'll put your contact info below. I know you're pretty full with your practice right now, but I know you have some other things in the works coming up.
I do. I always have something bubbling up. I'm actually I just moved offices, and I have an office that's larger now, so I'm going to hold some groups in there.
Oh, that's great.
And my practice is full, and so I operate a waiting list. But the truth is most people have. They're okay with that. It kind of works. It gives them some time to get adjusted to knowing that it's, okay, this is what's coming. I'm going to start in 2 months kind of thing or whatever it might be. So it actually hasn't been a problem.
Okay. Oh, great. Well, we will put your contact info below in the section there. And if you enjoy this video, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe as well, because I'll be doing a lot more of these keto chat videos. But thank you, Katie, for being here with me.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.